Welcome back, everyone, to a Grit Daily Startup Show. Jordan French here, your host. Super excited to talk to our guest, Ovie Faruq. We can nerd out on everything from distress trading, what's going on in NFT land, dead or not, and some exciting things about community building a brand. Ovie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, it is. It's Startup Show, and it's Grit Daily. So it's not Grit Monthly, so it's
I
every
like
day.
it.
Every day for us here, Ovi. So for some of those who are uninitiated, I just want to get to the heart of it because people generally know the NFT space. It's a bit dead, but it's sort of evolved in a lot of ways. And one of the things that you're doing is very IRL as people call it in real life. Just for more foundation, tied to a drinks brand that we'll get to in just a second. But you just did a launch of product in LA, uh, totally sold out. Get us up to speed, Ovi, on like the right here and now, so people understand the context around that.
Yeah, so last week we did an actual product launch of our drinks, which started out as an NFT project,
Yeah.
and that launched across a handful of 7-Eleven stores in Los Angeles and California. So yeah, 3 years ago we started the NFT project, which was just, a piece of artwork that I made that was free to claim for anyone, and we've gone on a massive journey and ended up there. So it's quite a large process to get there, but it's definitely been an interesting journey.
It's a great way to tease it. Everyone knows, especially from this show, it's like we call it the 30-year overnight success here, at least three,
Yeah.
probably more if you include all the trading foundation. But just so people have that news kind of out front. So just to repeat it back to you, you did a sounds like really cool partnership with 7-Eleven, which is a convenience store certainly in LA. A lot of us right now are thinking about Japan and Japan 7-Eleven. Have you been to those, Ovi? I have to ask. To the
I,
counter
I
or
I
heard
have,
about?
yes. Yeah, I went to Japan I think 3 years ago, and I did go to the 7-Elevens there as well. It's a very
World.
cool place. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a different
yeah.
world though. Yeah.
Next Rekt collab,
Yeah,
Tokyo.
there we go.
Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, do some in Atami, wherever you need to. We have some nice Japanese audience. They'll enjoy the shout out and beg you for it. But to drill down on it even more, so people understand that tangible product, tell us a little bit more about it. It's a non-alcoholic seltzer. Tell us more.
So it's a drink that has zero alcohol, zero caffeine. It has very low sugar, just about 5 grams of sugar per can, but it also has no artificial sweeteners or artificial flavoring. It's all natural ingredients. And I think the idea of it was if you want to, everyone these days are health conscious, pretty much everyone actually. Um, but a lot of the healthier products on the market tend to have branding that I think feels simple, clean, basic, often very pastel in colors and, you know, pale white colors and that kind of stuff. They're not very cool visually. And I think a lot of people don't drink alcohol, but will still go out to have a good time, go to parties, events, festivals, that kind of stuff. So our idea was to create a drink that wasn't necessarily unhealthy, but actually looks and feels cool and presents an option for people who want to consume things with cool branding, but are still healthy, basically.
Right, and you know the question's coming, the relationship between that and Rekt as a Web3 project. But to clarify, the drink itself is also called Rekt. Is that right, Ovi?
That's correct. Yeah. So, the overall company is called Rekt Brands, and Rekt Drinks is the first product under that umbrella.
And then performance. How did this do? So, to be honest, it sounds like you were guessing a bit, or maybe sort of intuited into what your own demographic and audience of Rekt NFT holders might want. But so we're all listening carefully, and the natural question, right? How did it do?
Yeah, it was very experimental.
Okay.
So we kind of took a shot in the dark and threw some spaghetti at the wall to see if it would stick, which is the term I like to use. But it's done very well so far. We launched our drinks in the format of limited edition drops. So
Mhm.
the first one we did in October of last year, and we sold out of about 222,000 cans in the space of 48 hours, and that was across 32 different countries. So that was a very strong start to our initial sale. We've since done two more large drops of a similar amount, about 200 to 220,000 cans each, which subsequently sold out in 40 minutes and then in 17 minutes. So it's sort of gone from like this experiment to having some good success to now the drink's selling out very, very fast. And it's something that I think we only could have achieved within Web3. And, it's virtually impossible to do this in such a short space of time within the first 12 months of our life as a company, doing it in a traditional way.
Yeah, in humility, yeah, limited knowledge about drink products. Certainly, non-alcohol
Yeah.
liquors is it's crowded. At least I think it is. We've had more
Yep.
than 12 guests on in the space, and they all reach some level of success. That does seem really fast to sell out. You're hinting at though that there's some deeper relationship. Let me repeat it back to you. You saying that really without that Web3 community you'd have relatively, much weaker showing for the Rekt drink than you would, with that audience. Expand on that. What's going on there with that relationship, Obi? Curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rekt, the project, has a token or a coin, a cryptocurrency called Rekt coin. And this is what we call a brand coin. And we've sort of coined this term, pun intended, um, which means it's a token that doesn't necessarily have any specific utility. The coin doesn't own the IP to the brand. It doesn't directly benefit from revenues, but it's a coin that's owned by and earned by supporters of the brand or fans of the brand, and its value goes up and down based on sentiment, attention, performance of the company, just because that's the liquid way people can express a view on it. So, in terms of the drink selling out, what we did was construct a mechanism whereby every time you purchase a drink from these limited edition drops, you would actually earn some of this token. You would earn Retcoin.
Hmm.
When we did our first drop, people actually, if people held on to their Retcoin from that very first drop, they will have made something like 10 to 11 times their money from just buying drinks. And, as the market cap of the token has grown, obviously the return is lower, but people generally are, to be blunt, making a lot of money from buying drinks, claiming this coin, and then making the decision as to whether they want to sell or hold it. And I think this is, again, this is the only thing that can be done. This is only possible within Web3. And an example I can give you is, let's say you are a fan of a startup or a challenger brand and you want to support them. How do you do that? You buy their products at an early stage. And if they do really well in the next 5 years and they blow up, what do you have to show for it? Nothing really other than bragging rights, maybe some early photos, but that's kind of it. Whereas if you buy Rekt drinks and you also earn this coin, and if we then do really well over the next 5 years and you've held on to this coin, the value of it will probably be a lot higher. And you've actually sort of like been rewarded for being an early supporter and being involved in the journey at this stage. So I think that's a reward mechanism that can only really be done within crypto because it's the only market where participants value things that the rest of the world seems to think have zero intrinsic value. And technically speaking, from a model-driven analysis, they may be correct, but yet they still have value and things, trade at hundreds of millions or indeed billions of dollars of market cap just because that's the price someone is willing to pay for it. So that's generally why stuff's been selling out pretty fast because our price keeps increasing. Like the Rekt coin is up, I think something like 600 over 600% in the last quarter. More and more attention is coming into what we're doing, and the drinks sell out faster because people are, very keen to A, get the product, but B, also earn some of this coin and then just be a part of the journey and the story.
Yeah, certainly. It is fascinating. And we're all thinking, in the audience, including me, maybe every brand could launch a brand coin. This is almost like a sort of a pilot. Like the Rekt itself is an experiment, not just so. And so the Rekt drink is like an experiment within the experiment, right? Or like sort of a subdivision of that. But on the nuts and bolts of that, just so we're super clear on it, how does one sort of redeem or earn the token exactly from the purchase? There's perhaps a QR code, or what does that mechanism look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it depends where you purchase the drinks. When we did the 7-Eleven store activations last week,
Mhm.
the promotion was that every time you purchased 4 cans for $10, you would be able to claim $100 worth of Rekt coin, and you were given a little like voucher with a QR code and a scratch section which you could peel off, and it would give you a code, and you basically scan it, enter the code, and we use the claim processes used on a chain called abstract chain. So it doesn't require you to go through complicated hurdles of having a seed phrase and setting up a wallet. You can actually connect it to your email address or your Google account. So in the space, in the space of about 3 or 4 taps, you are able to claim the coin. When we've done these online sales, that process is actually a lot more automated, where your account has your crypto wallet already pre-connected, and
Mhm.
either you can purchase using crypto or you can purchase using your credit card or whatever.
Mhm.
And once the points are earned, a claim window opens up for the tokens, and you're able just to connect and claim pretty smoothly.
Makes sense. In that window, it's timed, so you've
It's
got
a
maybe
timed window, correct? Yeah.
days or so to redeem it.
Yeah, so we've done the very first one we did. I think there was 2 weeks to redeem, but
Or fuse. Okay.
the last two,
Yeah.
it was just a 3-day redemption period. So
Oh,
it kind of depends on a case by case basis.
yeah. And then really good rich data here for the enterprise folks listening, because you know where they're headed with this. Ears are turned towards this podcast on this question, which is, what was the redemption rate? Can you share roughly, or even just a range of data if you have it, or sort of top of your head? What did that sort of function look like?
Yeah, it depends on where you stamp the market cap, but if we take it as the price of the coin at the point of redemption, on the first season, I believe it was a 3x return on your drinks. So if you spent
Oh, yeah.
$10 buying drinks,
Yeah,
you
I
actually made back $30.
was actually asking what
Oh,
what percentage of people who could redeem, because it sounds like it's on every purchase. What
I
percentage
understand.
went ahead and redeemed the coin?
That's actually a really interesting question. So, the first season we did, 50% of our payments were in fiat, 50% were in crypto, and
Mm.
50% of people did not redeem.
Hmm.
So only half of the people which
Guess
redeemed.
which half that was. Was
Yeah.
there? Did you find a very strong correlation between fiat users and non-redemption, or was it
Yes, but
a mixed bag?
yeah, it was though, as you can imagine, very strong correlation there. And to me, it was quite surprising because part of this is like, oh, we're selling out so many drinks because we're just giving free money and no one cares about the product. But in the second sale we did, it was 65% paid within fiat, but the redemption rate was still roughly about 50%, I would say. So there are people out there who are just buying this drink for the drink,
Hmm.
not going ahead and redeem the tokens. And I guess like perhaps passing on the free money aspect of it, maybe they don't care or they just think it's not real. I'm not really sure what the exact reasoning is behind it. Maybe there are still too many barriers to entry for someone to go through the effort of getting things set up. But it's interesting to see people want to buy it for the product itself. It's interesting to see people clearly want to buy it for the financial returns. But it feels like we're kind of split down the middle, about 50-50 still.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's an interesting data
Yeah.
point. Certainly look forward to, hearing more as this evolves. I imagine there will be, and we can certainly talk a little later on this podcast about sort of what's next and future rollouts, and perhaps those might be other products. But that's a really key number and sort of a function, right? Of you can sort of visualize the coefficients in front of them and so on. But if people use a certain currency or not, or they're sort of checked in, right, enabled with
Yeah.
a wallet ready to go, what do those redemption rates look like? And that's particularly interesting because of the growth of the space, right? Like more and more people have a wallet, just sort of like
Yeah.
set up because of something already, and that initial hurdle often is overcome. And from there, you'd certainly want to observe, right? Like, is a not super liquid $100 equivalent enough? What's that number? How, what would that model look like if you were trying to approach 99%, right? OV would be a question you might
Yep.
ask. Or what would drop it below 50%? What if you took away the value entirely? Right, that'd be a fascinating sort of
Yep.
something to model out. And then on the other end, right, sort of turning it entirely around, just to be super clear, because everyone's has this on their mind too as they're listening. Uh, were at the time of each of these drops, were people able to also buy the Rekt token sort of on the open market, or sort of how just unpack that for us too, Obi? Like, how did that somewhat simultaneously or maybe contemporaneously work to drive the price action that you shared with us earlier?
Yeah, so people are able to earn the token from buying the drinks, but it's a liquid token that trades on the open market, on the secondary market. So you're able to buy it, on chain through something like Uniswap. You're able to buy it through a centralized exchange like Gate or KuCoin. You're even able to buy it through using a Coinbase wallet if it's connected through, the decentralized swap system as well. So there are multiple ways to buy it in the open market if you just want to own the coin directly and skip past the drink step. And of course, a lot of that's been happening, which has been driving the price action because if when the drinks sell out very fast and people don't are not able to buy drinks, they have cash flow left over to to spend. And it seems like the human mind works in a way where it's like, oh, I missed out on the drinks, and now I just have to buy the coin outright. And that we generally seem to move higher um, after every drop, I would say. So maybe that's an explanation of what's been happening there.
Yeah, it goes back to your original point and our shared sort of original sort of boundaries, right? That were or sort of perimeter that we put on this conversation, which is that it's it's a potential tool to monetize what might be attention or a function of attention and brand value or some urgency sort of induced there that relates to, for example, each drop. It sounds like there is also a strong correlation between the timing of the drop, right? And a price movement, it's not like there's necessarily some big distribution or lag to that. It sounds like there's a pretty direct impact, which also is an interesting thing to discover and sort of inspect and expand on. And in terms of just because some listeners will want to nerd out on this and certainly want to know the answer to this question, Ovi, which is in terms of the trading action. Are you in a place where you're putting tools sort of on top of that? For example, using options or swaps or sort of like micro trading arbitrage to do what you can to kind of keep a little bit of control over that price. Maybe not the best word to use, but let's say avoid wild swings, right? For example, or is it just completely free to trade? And just like at the whims of the market. Curious if you guys have some sort of internal tools to help stabilize or reduce volatility, for example. Ovi, thoughts on that?
No, not really on our side. Like we don't do anything to control or interfere with the price. So it is crypto and it can be volatile, and we've had massive swings up, we've had massive swings down, and you have to be very cognizant of the crypto environment, the macro environment, and we're definitely susceptible to that, just like any other coin is. So there isn't anything that we do specifically to control that. There is a certain percentage of circulating supply and a certain percentage of supply that's held back for future community rewards. So right now, about 38% of the tokens are locked in the token foundation, and those emit gradually over time as we do more drinks drops and other activations where people are able to be rewarded in the coin. But as far as all the other funky stuff go, it's not something that we engage in.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, no bond. It's not funky at all.
Yeah, true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just price stability and that sort of thing, and often arbitrage, between exchanges. Just super curious if there was, any mechanism like that. We've seen more than a few firms make money off their own token by arbitraging price, for example. That's where I was going with that, just to be super
Right.
clear. Yeah,
Yep.
interesting things people always ask all the time. They're like, "Hey, why didn't you ask this?" So we're curious to see what now we know. Rekt is completely the market is 100%
Yeah.
in charge, which of course with the sort of treasury caveats that you referred
Yep.
to. And let's look backwards a bit. I think people now they've heard all this. We're super curious, about you. At the open, we mentioned you were doing distress trading. Seems like a wild swing in terms of other than the relationship to markets, of course, that we just went over. A wild swing to sort of get into this. Uh, just your background, if you could share a bit more on that, Ovi.
Yeah. So I started my career at Barclays Capital, and I was a high yield and distressed credit and credit derivatives trader. So yeah, fully markets driven. Not, I mean, apart from the market aspect of it, nothing to do with drinks or NFTs or anything like that. So it was quite a big change for me to put it bluntly.
Right. It's, for most high finance, perhaps it's a lot, quite a few, maybe even like $10 terms, if you will. Seems like a wild swing. So what was that catalyst to say, hey, it's time to leave. I see an opportunity in what is broadly blockchain, cryptocurrency, potentially community building space in the launch of Rec. What was that? What was that moment, if you recall?
Yeah, so I've been crypto skeptic for many years, having heard about Bitcoin first in 2012, believe it or not. But it was only in 2021 when, you had this whole fear of inflation going a lot higher while the Fed wanted to keep interest rates low. And at the time, within the subset of things that I was trading at Barclays, I had no way to really express that view. Um, we had regulations at Barclays where if you wanted to trade any other stocks, it would have to go through an approval process. You'd have a holding day, a 30-day holding period. So it was very cumbersome to do any personal account trading while working at an investment bank. But at that time, there were no restrictions on crypto.
Hmm.
So that combination of being able to freely trade crypto alongside understanding Bitcoin being a good trade in an environment of not only high inflation but also low interest rates, I think was the thing that sort of just like made sense to me. That's when it kind of clicked for me. I was like, now I kind of understand why I would buy Bitcoin. And so I first bought Bitcoin in January 2021. And as everyone does within crypto, you don't just stop at Bitcoin. You end up looking at other stuff and trying to figure out, what are all these other tokens? What are all these other technologies? So I then bought Ether, and that's when I got into the NFT space and started collecting and buying NFTs. And after that, seeing the volatility in crypto, which also I would say like displayed a lot of very similar characteristics to what I was trading in terms of the dynamics of the market. Like
Hmm.
distressed companies are very volatile. They'll go up massively, they'll go down massively. You know, one day a company exists, the next day it's bankrupt. You had these very wild swings, and it was an OTC market as well. So, um, trading crypto and particularly NFTs, it was just so similar. But instead of it being Hertz rental car company, it was just like the Bored Ape Yacht Club collection, but the asset prices would move in a very similar way. So um, it felt very natural to me, but very quickly I realized that just the opportunity set in crypto, which felt very nascent, felt very overlooked by traditional finance. And this is 2021, so long before the Bitcoin ETF, long before the involvement of BlackRock, long before you know Trump being pro crypto and the US strategic Bitcoin stockpile, all this kind of stuff like didn't even exist then. And to me, it felt like a big potential opportunity with much more upside than what I was doing.
Yeah, certainly. That said, and I have to ask, right? You probably earned uh, quite well at your job. You could just continue buying Bitcoin. That seemed like a plausible alternative. So why take, what seemed like quite a sort of almost speculative risk, right? Wrecked it didn't exist. It was in your mind.
Yeah.
Share more on that, Obi.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think for me, I felt like I'd gotten to a point, I'd been at Barclays for about 10 years, and I'd gotten to a point where I kind of wanted to do my own thing. Like I took a lot of risk as a trader, and if a trade didn't go your way, you would often get a tap on your shoulder saying, okay, you have to cut this position now. And I liked the freedom of being able to like trade and do things myself within crypto. And personally, I found that I could actually make more money trading crypto because, when you make profit, granted you're gambling with your own money, and I use the word gambling because it's very risky, but if I made X amount on something within crypto, I would take home X. But if I made X at Barclays, I would take home somewhere between 5 or 8% of that. So it's a much higher risk strategy because you go from trading with the bank's capital to trading with your own capital. And if you have a big drawdown with your own personal capital, that's, a much bigger downside risk to you. But I had some really good success, and I'm familiar with and understand how to manage my risk and how to manage my bankroll, if you like. And just having had a taste of that, and having had a taste of not having a boss, and kind of being able to do my own hours, and being able to, go big on risk when I wanted to and just hold through it, I just couldn't really. That world and that way of working just seemed way more exciting to me, and way more like something I felt like I could do for a longer period of time than just staying at Barclays. So, um, you know, like you said, I could have just continued to get paid like a decent salary and bonus, use some of that to buy Bitcoin and done very well. But I think there's no way I'd be doing what I'm doing now had I stayed at Barclays, right? And I think having that flexibility of exploring a new world and not just being tied to one thing as my main thing, was the main allure of it, I would say.
Sure, and it sounds like then you discovered, or there was always there, and you knew it. Some entrepreneurship DNA, perhaps, inside. And thanks for saying that. Certainly, the name Rekt, we've sort of bandied about a bunch, but what is behind that name? Rekt. And you got Rekt.com. We'll bring that up at the tail end of the episode. But what's behind that name? What is it? What does it mean, Ovi? Or
Yeah,
why Rekt? Why Rekt?
yeah, that's a really good question. Sort of following on from what I said about taking risk, like for me, I've always sort of been like an all in or nothing type of person. And in my career at Barclays, I'd take, huge outsized bets sometimes, and some of them went very well, but some of them went very poorly, and you could say like I kind of got wrecked. But for me, the meaning of wrecked isn't just the idea of losing money, or, getting intoxicated, or whatever, however you may use it. It's not really necessarily just a negative thing. I think it's the idea of like, taking an outside risk, perhaps not winning that particular bet, but still having the ability and the confidence to bounce back from it, and still having, I always say having a chip at the table to sort of like make it all back. I think that's this idea. It's this idea of survivorship. And that's something that I personally like, really resonate with, having been through those ups and downs quite a lot in my job. And it's something that I've just, Rex started out as an artwork collection that I created called Rekt Guy. And having spent some time in the crypto world, I just realized like, these guys compared to the guys at the bank, these guys are taking crazy risk and, betting their entire net worth on one thing, losing it all and somehow making it all back. It's just like, no care in the world for risk management or discipline or anything. It's just, it really was truly the Wild West. And culturally and artistically, it's something that I found very like interesting. Like it's very like, I was like, wow, I just can't believe people are like this and just somehow getting through life. It was kind of an incredible thing. And that's something I wanted to like capture in that art collection. So I think Rekt really is just, it's not just a word, or it's not just a drink or a brand, or it's not just, it doesn't mean one thing. I think it's a movement. It's almost like a culture, and it defines a lot of people who like to take risk, who, are not afraid of going to zero because they know they have the ability to start back at zero and work their way up again. And that's kind of like what that word means and encompasses for me, I would say.
Yeah, it sounds like it's sort of imbued in the philosophy, around this, and
Yeah,
harkens also back to, sort of your origins, in the space, and perhaps parlance or vernacular from a former, and maybe also current life in trading.
yeah,
Sort of heard the W form of that word before, that's for sure. And then I want to touch on a whole sort of broader topic, very germane to Rekt, and that is the community building aspect. We touched upon it, a few times, and the relationship between sort of buyers of a drink product. You called it an experiment. I think a great way to describe anything, really. In this space,
Covers your bases when you say
cover
experiment.
your bases. Pull it right. It's a pilot, everyone. Pull it right back, right? Everything's a pilot. Uh, and community, right? And I think what we see much more often, or saw much more often in the Web3 space, but especially after sort of maybe the post OpenSea phase of NFTs, was a much more functional, highly utility driven, sort of B2B, right? Like a lot of like gatekeeping tools. Really, not much of an emphasis from that lens on community building. We've seen some sort of bright lights in contrast, right? There are some projects that are tied to NFTs. We've seen the VFriends franchise sort of make a go at it. Certainly with the events, probably familiar with that. Maybe perhaps not the right word to use to say maybe more successful, but fairly you could deposit that. Pudgy Penguins has sort of this sort of cartoonish brand that's reached some level of mystique success. You mentioned Bored Ape Yacht Club,
Yep.
that being sort of a one with some age, which is always sort of a funny thing to say, given it's only a couple years old still, really. Uh, your take on that, is that sort of a refreshed direction? Is that something that you even care to emphasize with the Rec brand? Again, being that relationship between sort of a community build and that
Yep.
brand. Your take, Ovi.
Yeah, I for us, it's the most important thing. Like there's zero possibility of us being here and achieving what we have achieved without a loyal community, without a diehard community that's they're backing and supporting everything that you do. I think one of crypto, for all its criticism, one of the things it does best is foster communities and reward communities. And we talked about the mechanics of Rekt. And that makes people feel like they're a part of something, like you can have a company or a brand that sells products to its customers, and they're very much customers slash consumers. In crypto, and you've mentioned Pudgy Penguins and a few other like successful examples, while these people do spend their money to purchase those products, they're also rewarded for them, and they truly are communities, maybe even stakeholders. You can go take it even a step further because they're sort of along for the ride. It's not just like, okay, I buy this can of Coke, I drink it, and then I kind of just get on with the rest of my day. It's like, okay, I buy a Rekt drink, I get this Rekt coin. Now I'm kind of like following the price of it and seeing what's going on, and now I'm just emotionally invested in this story. And that I think is the difference. And when you have people who are emotionally invested in the story, and when you have a large amount of them, that's very powerful because it transforms them from just being a consumer into a marketer. And it's like, okay, hey, now I kind of like own a piece of this, or I have a stake in this. Let me tell all my friends, check out this Rekt thing. Like, look at what I did and how much money I made, and you guys should get involved. And there's no better marketing still to this day than word of mouth, I think. And the way that communities work within the space, it's naturally set up for that to happen, I think.
Yeah, it, again goes back to sort of the architecture, right, that we discussed a bit earlier, and brands. I think there's a lot for sort of existing large brands to think about. Still, a lot of them have sort of made a foray into the space. Some maybe I just to be fair, probably most of those haven't quite like worked, maybe in the way that they think, but not to certainly not to give up yet, given, reasonably quite a few successful examples, and Rec being one, in the grand experiment that is, if we view it that way. There's a lot there, a lot of there,
Yes.
certainly, if you will. And then just so people understand, so the listeners understand, sort of like, what's next and how it plays into the community build. Uh, you've now shared that you had a few, several now, successful launches, drops, as you call them,
Yep.
of the drink version of this, Rekt, 7-Eleven, perhaps there's more there. But what does the rest of that roadmap look like, to use a very 2021 term for the
Yes.
NFT? Uh, Your take, anything that maybe you could share, even just sort of broad paint brushstrokes on how you think about what you do with a community next or if it's even necessary. Ovi, your take.
Yeah, I think this becomes a successful project and a success story that's come from crypto if we're able to turn Rekt into a bigger, more global brand where a traditional person who has no involvement in crypto has heard of it and understands it and is able to benefit from it. And that's the underlying goal. So the 7-Eleven store launches we did last week was a really good first step into that world where we had people coming in with no knowledge of crypto and being able to, just with a few taps on their phone suddenly earn $100 of this thing, and now they're part of the story, right? So when we did the 7-Eleven store launches, we sold out of about 2,500 drinks across 3 stores, which is like record sales for all of these stores. So we're hoping to expand our footprint within traditional convenience stores and supermarkets across the US and across the world actually over the second half of this year, and we've been in conversations there. So I would love to end the year with more non-crypto people being familiar with the brand, being familiar with the product, and also understanding how they can earn from it, basically. And that is the main goal this year. So we have some of that stuff in the works. We have also been developing products that aren't just sparkling water. So we're going to take a step into the functional space, which has been doing very well in the last 12 months. So think stuff like clean energy or focus type drinks, hydration, electrolyte products, and also even products that aren't just limited to drinks. So we've been in product development for pretty much this entire year, and we'll have some more stuff coming out later this year, which I think will be pretty exciting for everyone to be a part of. So two pretty big things on the roadmap, so to speak, and I'm hopeful we can achieve some of that this year, but it's going to be an ongoing thing to really get it to its full potential, I would say.
Yeah, certainly. Like I said earlier, 30-year overnight success is the most. So you've got another, let's see, 26 or so years, plenty of time
Exactly.
tackle all the things. I think what's interesting about that though is I think you'll be able to sort of bifurcate, right, or like pull apart what's driving the sort of sold out concept, right, or phenomenon, I should say, Ovi, and that is, it's very possible that the drink is just so damn good, right, that that's driving it, and we're
Yeah.
all thinking, oh wow, they really want the crypto, and it's just wildly good. Very possible, right? It's possible that that's the case. And even when you get into other sort of derivations of it, you discussed, there are other drinks. I think it'll be really fascinating when you get outside of the drink space to see if that sort of intense demand, right, is there. Also playing with the sort of supply demand dynamics. If you end up with larger drops of something, to see if that tempers a bit. It could be a lot in that signal, right? It could be all, sort of two or three things going at it. The second and third, obviously being, the Rekt name. People just might really have a strong affinity towards it. You do, right? I could totally see a cohort being after that, and that's the reason they buy. And third being, of course, right, the reward and the incentive that you provide. So it'd be
Yeah.
really interesting to see that data parse out, see how you're able to play with that. But certainly sounds like you're on to something here, even if we don't totally know,
But it
what
is.
what really it is. But super fascinating to enterprise, right? With existing big, so you're sort of like everything from Heinz ketchup and French's mustard and Gator, right? Like very intently interested in hearing this type of conversation and really sort of out of the gate, right? Witness something and try to understand what they could do, borrow elements or tools or what is ultimately technology, right? To money, right? Technology that it
Yeah.
is to sort of come up with a certain effect on the market. But I'm getting the flag from our editor. I do want to give you the last word, but first let's make sure everyone can reach you. So it's Rekt, that's Rekt. We said that earlier, and it's rekt.com. Super simple. And Ovi, if someone wants to reach you specifically, what's a great way? What's the best avenue for that?
Yeah, sure. I'm very active on Twitter, which is now known as X. So OSF. underscore Rekt, R-E-K-T is my handle there. It's the same handle on Instagram too, if that's a preferred mechanism. But yeah, pretty active on X. I often tweet my thoughts about this stuff pretty much on a daily basis. So I would say that's the best way to follow me and also get in touch.
And you mentioned Instagram. Can you just repeat that one more time so people have
Yeah.
for IG? Go ahead.
So it's OSF underscore Rekt. Oscar Sierra Foxtrot for the phonetic fans
There
out there.
you go. Yeah, easy enough. And then I said I'd give you the last word, proverbially, so to speak. Uh, Over to you, Ovi. Your last words, thoughts encapsulating all this.
Yeah, no, no, appreciate the time on this. It's always great to chat about things. And, I do genuinely believe what we're doing, at the very least, is it interesting? Will it work out? Will it continue to work? These things are unanswered questions, and this whole thing is an experiment. So we'll find out in due course. But I do think it's interesting. I do think it's one positive use of crypto, which is a world where we've seen many bad actors over the years. And I think if what we're doing works, it could potentially be a playbook for other companies and brands out there. So even if you're not going to buy drinks and even if you're not going to buy a Rekt coin, I would suggest following along in the story because I think things will get very interesting, and we're gonna, keep working hard on it and keep trying our best.
Yeah, certainly already interesting for sure. I think that's shared viewpoint. And thanks for that. Good luck with everything, and certainly we'll have to do a check in whenever that comes. 6 months, maybe a
Yeah,
year. You've got 26 of them, so we could do more than a couple. But appreciate you having on, and thanks. And for everyone out there, you'll be able to listen to this episode on any of your sort of favorite audio devices and or platforms, especially Spotify and Apple Music. For those who like to read up and follow along on these episodes, great partners that we have at Apple News and of course at gritdaily.com. That's all for Startup Show episode today with Ovi. Thanks again, Ovi. Until next time.
thank you.